Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another weekly episode of the book cover of the month. This is the recording for week 4 of August, which means we're going to pick our last cover for the month of August before we start our tournament for the overall. The winners of each week face off for the big title of the 2021 MLSWeech August book cover of the month. And what basically happens is I look at some covers, I talk about what makes them work, talk about a few things that I think could make them better, and then I let you guys vote on your favorite down below. Speaking of down below, would you please be kind enough to click the like button, the share button, notification button. Honestly, if there's a button down there, just click everything and you'll probably help me out a lot. Among the things that are down there to click would be my author profile link on Amazon. I am M.L.S. I am a self-published author. I write predominantly paranormal to epic fantasy, somewhere in between in that category. But I have a love of book covers, and I just kind of enjoy talking about them and looking at them. Same way I like looking at movie posters. So always something I enjoy doing. I hope you enjoy watching. And before we get looking at the covers for this week, let's look at the winner for last week. And that was a pretty easy choice. The winner is the She Who Became the Sun by Shelley Parker Chan. There's just nothing to not like about this cover. The color is amazing. The art is unique. The detail is fantastic. The text is well chosen. Everything is well placed. Honestly, this is just an amazingly done title. Maybe if you're going to nitpick, you don't like the U coming into the head of the figure on the mountain, but you know, sometimes even the imperfections make something perfect. So this was a fantastic cover. Congratulations to the artist and Shelley Parker Chan, and best of luck in the competition that will be starting next week. And now we're going to start looking at, as soon as I get my computer back, we're going to start looking at week 4. I'm a little worried about one of them. Nope, there it is. The first one we're going to look at is a cover called Shadowed Beginning by Raj Rowland. I'm going to tell you right now that some of these names are just darn hard to pronounce. I'm going to do my best not to butcher them, but just give me a little bit of grace. So I liked the graphic that was put behind the text, although I wish the text was a little less script-like. You have this overflowing text that's overlapping one another, which isn't bad in and of itself. But then you put that on top of a graphic, and you put that on top of a starscape. And if you have that many elements together, it gets pretty darn hard to see. I love the kind of Disney feel that this has. I think the castle's lit interestingly. I like the color. There are some aspects about this I like. And I do like the graphic, even if I don't like how everything's arranged. But I think honestly, if they worked on the font a little bit differently so that it didn't compete so much with the graphic, that in and of itself would have made this go from a good cover to a great cover, in my opinion. But it is still a good cover. The next cover we're going to look at is The Bone Gate by Rory Michelson. This is a very simplistic cover. I'm going to bring it up for you guys to look at. Straight black and white with a little bit of red. We call that spot color. When you have a mono or duotone image and then you throw a splash of color, what that's going to do is it's going to yank the eye straight to that color. And so that's going to stand out. I really think that the idea of the cityscape and the landscape on a skull is done an awful lot, but it's still fun to look at. It's still nice to see. I think the skull looks cool. I like that the text was placed and used in an interesting way. It kind of looks like the ransom letter, old school, when people would cut up newspapers. So that's a nice, unique choice that kind of fits with the theme or the genre. It's simplistic. It's not overly complicated. It brings in the eye. It's easy to read. It sets a tone. And those are all successful things that book covers do. So that is the second book cover. The third book cover we're going to look at is The Prince of Sand by Area Noble. And this cover has a few things going for it. The first thing I'll note is the detail of an actual sand crown crumbling into the granules and being able to see those individual details is a nice touch. The thing about the composition here is people never notice when nothing is in the way. So when you look at an image and everything's just kind of where it goes, it doesn't distract you. And so you don't get a lot of credit. It's kind of like an offensive lineman in football. No one ever talks about him, but the quarterback's never sacked. And so, you know, there's a reason for that. There's a reason that that works. In this case, every single element, you got your text, you got the crown, you got the background, you got your title text. There isn't a lot of overlapping. And I know that in previous episodes, I've talked about how overlapping some elements can create depth, and that's true. But there's a big difference between overlapping to create depth and just having crap on top of crap on top of crap. When in doubt, keep everything separate, give everything its unique spot, and it will at least be an easy to read illustration. And that's what this does. That's what this is. Again, you have this little spot color of red. Red is a genuine color people use for spot color technique. It is a powerful color. It draws the eye. So you might see this in a lot of instances, but it all works together well to create an effective cover. Next cover we're going to look at is The Fire People. And here's the name here, folks. Hashavarmeth Bika. And I truly, truly hope I pronounced that right. If you happen to read this or you're a fan of this person's work and you want to help me with the proper pronunciation and give your author a few votes, by all means do so. I don't mind being corrected. This kind of feels, it checks a lot of boxes in what I like in art. It has a comic book feel, and I grew up reading comic books. So when you have that artistic nature, it's already going to draw me. So there's some bias there. But it's okay to play to bias, especially when the technique you're using is designed to market to that specific audience. Now, if this doesn't have a comic book feel, then it can get you can get some mixed messages. So the worst thing you can do as an author is to have the wrong person read your book. If you're a fan of the high romance with a lot of love triangles, and you prefer a lot of steam, I don't know how much you'd enjoy my work. But if you like, clever plot twists, if you like deep character, then maybe you will like my work. Why I'm mentioning that is if I pick this up and I read it and it feels like a comic, and it even has a number 1 here. It's hard for me to see because I'm red-green colorblind, but I noticed it. If it is in that vein, then I read it, I'll be happy because it'll be a comic book of some kind. But if I love comic books and then I see this and it reminds me of it and then I read it and it's not like a comic book in tone, in pace, then I will be that much more likely to hate it even more because I thought it was something I would like and it wasn't what I thought it was. And believe it or not, whenever you're looking at art, when something isn't what you think it should have been, you're going to be that much more angry at it than someone who just looks at it for the sake of looking at this art. So that's kind of why I had to kind of go into that. I love the use of the color. I love the use of shadow. There is a figure of some kind behind this individual. I assume it's a monster because the guy's got claw marks on his back. But whatever is going on, all these elements sit together well. And just the style of the drawing is something that I really appreciate. So, I wanted to present it and talk about how you match concept to audience. And then it's up to you to fulfill that promise. For the record, I'm not inherently against romance. It's just not my cup of tea. So if that's your favorite genre to read, more power to you. It's your time, it's your money. It's just important to note that every artist has to work hard to deliver and make sure that their product, the promise their product makes, is fulfilled by the product. That's the distinction I want to make. We got a few more covers to look at. And the first one, again, we see an example of using red as spot color. We have a generally black image with red tone, and that's going to bring the eye. This is called Memorial Station, and it's by a few authors, Nicole Tanquary, Ben Hennessy, and Paul R. Hardy. Again, a lot of what I'm seeing this week, simplistic design with spot color as an accent. I promise I don't sit down and be like, my theme this week is going to be this. Honestly, all I do, if you're curious, I bring up Amazon, I go, I select filters, 90 days, science fiction and fantasy, English language, and then I click sort by publication date, and then I just start scrolling. And I will admit, if I start going through pages, I start lowering what I'm looking for. I'm always looking for great. But if I'm 15 pages in and I only have one cover, then I'll be like, okay, what's not terrible? And I move from there. And, you know, this is what customers, consumers on Amazon searching for new books are looking at as well. So I'm not always looking for a theme, but it happens that each week I see something. And I think the reason for that is, you know, people imitate what's succeeding. So they look at portrait covers. They're like, okay, I'm going to do a portrait cover. They look at text-based covers. They say, okay, I'm going to do a text-based cover. They're looking at simplistic design with spot color. They're like, okay, that's what I'm going to do. It might not be that neat in coincidence, but it is a pattern that people follow. This cover is also the use of silhouette. One problem I have with it is it gets very, very hard to see the feet. I don't know, let me look around. Yeah, it is super duper hard to see the feet of this figure. And the whole point of a silhouette is to have detail, contrast. And if you don't have detail, contrast, and separation, that's the third element, detail, contrast, separation. If you don't have those things, then something's going to get lost. And right now what's lost is literally this person's feet. When you're scrolling down and you're looking around, you don't see that. Silhouettes stand out when you can make out the details, because it's you're giving the mind a picture that it wants to fill in. That's what silhouettes do as a whole. I like the cool skull that's working on there. I'm not really sure how the light is happening in the front of the skull when the red is part of the background. But you let things like that go when you're looking at fiction, especially when you're talking about something like a skull or that sense. If you silhouette the skull, then they're not really certain it's a skull. I don't know, there might have been a couple other ways. Maybe you do a side view where you see like a gap in the eye, but that is not really obeying how light works. So it gets a little tough on those veins, but it is a cool skull. It is a powerful use of spot color. Silhouettes usually make me happy. There are some people out there who are just tired of them, and I can respect that. I never get tired of silhouettes. The next one is Jigsaw Full Circle by David Allen Gordon. And I'm not honestly sure if this is part of the actual Saw saga or the Jigsaw saga or not. I think that it is. I didn't read the synopsis because all I'm doing is looking for book covers. So a lot of times in design, people look at patterns, people look at repetition, people look at color, and while red is a powerful spot color, when you have a red dot with a section of it missing, the same effect happens. The eye goes straight to that missing piece. It might be a little cliche, like, hey, I need to do a cover for Jigsaw. I know, I'll do a puzzle with a missing piece. If someone were to call it cliche, if someone were to say it's not the most original concept, I probably couldn't argue with them. But does it work? Absolutely. Absolutely it works because it draws to your eye. It has a consistent theme. It's very easy to understand. And you can't complain when a book cover does those things. So it's very, 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 very effective if it's not very, very clever. The last cover we're going to talk about today or this week is Fairy Tales by the Brothers Grimm. Now, before any of you start lighting me up in the comments down below, this is indeed a release within 90 days. The reason you're seeing this release within 90 days is because whenever you have these classics, they tend to re-release them and re-release them. It helps keep the sales up. I can't really yell at them for that. But you got to keep new products. You got to keep things looking fresh, and re-releasing it with new covers is one of the most common ways to do that. So I love this rendering of a fairy. I think it's a unique composition. It's a unique orientation in that she's upside down. I don't see any wings, but that there might be reasons for that. At the end of the day, just the sheer detail and the use of light on this fairy was more than enough for me. It was more than enough for me to look at. I wish to goodness sake that the title text was just a little smaller and to the right, because whereas She Who Became the Sun, this little teeny silhouette that made up like a small percentage of the overall concept, having that you go through it was still something I noticed, but it wasn't that big a bother. That giant letter F is in front of the head of the image that is featured in the cover, and it's a very, very different mistake. And it really bugs the bejesus out of me. But it doesn't take away from the beautiful light, the beautiful detail in the art, those kinds of things. So it's a nice cover. It is indeed a newer release. It's just not a new story to read. But you know, we want more and more people to read more and more. So why not let companies keep releasing products so that they stand out and look newer, even though that they're actually very, very old stories. So those are the 7 covers for this week. I'm going to ask you to head on down below. There's a link to the poll. You click in, you look at the covers, you pick your favorite. It's all done. The more you do that, the more you support authors and artists, the more you do me a solid. So I'd appreciate that as well. And you know, if you want to tell me what you think your favorite ones are, or if you ever just want to say, hey, I like this cover, would you be willing to put it up in next week's competition? I'm also willing to at least look at it and see what I think, but it has to be something that was released within 90 days. I try to keep newer titles up, and it makes it easier to search for new titles for the next week. I hope you've all enjoyed it. If so, please click a like down below, and I will see you next week. And as always, God be with you.